In the shimmering heart of San Francisco, where skyscrapers kissed the foggy sky, William Royce lived a life most could only dream of. A tech visionary in his late 30s, William was the man behind Royce Innovations, a groundbreaking company that had revolutionized artificial intelligence. To the world, he was a symbol of success, brilliant, driven, and untouchable. But beneath the polished surface of his life lay an emptiness he could no longer ignore. He just days away from his grand wedding to Isabella Hart, a supermodel and media darling. William believed he had finally found the missing piece of his perfect life. Isabella was everything society deemed enviable, stunning, poised, and adored by millions. Yet William's heart longed for something deeper, though he couldn't quite define what it was. The story takes a sharp turn one fateful evening, when William's world crumbles in a way he never anticipated. While driving past a luxury hotel, his eyes lock onto a sight that sends a cold shiver down his spine. Isabella, his fiancée, passionately embracing another man. The betrayal cuts him deeply, unraveling the carefully constructed narrative of his seemingly ideal life. As the sun sets over the bay, William stands at a crossroads. He is no longer the calm, calculated innovator the world admires. Instead, he is a man consumed by hurt and anger, silently vowing to turn the pain into a cold, calculated revenge. The city lights blurred as William Royce sat frozen in his car, gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. Outside the grand facade of a luxury hotel, the scene before him played out like a cruel twist in one of the dramas Isabella adored. She was there, draped in a crimson evening gown that accentuated her ethereal beauty, her every movement exuding the grace of someone who had always been admired. But tonight, her elegance was shared with someone else. A tall, impeccably dressed man who held her in an embrace far too intimate to be mistaken. William's chest tightened as he watched the man lean in, his lips meeting Isabella's with a tenderness that should have been reserved for him. The weight of the betrayal hit like a punch to the gut, shattering William's carefully curated sense of control. He had worked tirelessly for decades, building a tech empire that defined progress, influence, and power. Yet, in this moment, none of it mattered. The woman he trusted, the one he was days away from marrying, had desecrated the sanctuary of their relationship. Inside the car, William's mind raced, shifting between disbelief and searing anger. How could she, he thought, his breathing shallow as the scene replayed in his mind. He had given her everything, his time, his devotion, and a place in his meticulously crafted world. Now, all he felt was a gnawing emptiness. As the couple disappeared into the hotel, William finally exhaled, his breath shaky and his pulse pounding. He leaned back, closing his eyes briefly, forcing himself to think. His jaw clenched as he made a silent vow. If you think you can humiliate me, Isabella, you're mistaken. This isn't over. When William drove away from the hotel, his thoughts were no longer plagued by sorrow, but fueled by a cold determination. Beneath the glittering skyline of San Francisco, he began to plot a revenge that would strike at the very core of her pride. The soft chime of a bell echoed through the cozy coffee shop as Emma Clark wiped down the counter with practiced efficiency. The scent of freshly brewed coffee filled the air, blending with the faint hum of conversation from the few customers scattered around. Emma, a barista in her late 20s, carried herself with quiet poise. Her wavy brown hair was tied back in a loose bun, and her hazel eyes sparkled with warmth despite the long hours she worked each day. Emma's life was far from glamorous. After her parents passed away, she inherited their small home and a mountain of debt. She had spent years juggling multiple jobs to keep her head above water, but she never let her hardships dampen her spirit. Her modest dreams of stability and a life filled with small joys were what kept her going. For William Royce, Emma was an unnoticed constant. He often stopped by the coffee shop for his usual black coffee, his presence marked by the sleek suit and air of authority that surrounded him. To her, he was just another customer, albeit one whose demeanor spoke of wealth and power. Today, however, William's visit was different. He lingered at the counter longer than usual, his sharp blue eyes studying Emma as though seeing her for the first time. She noticed the tension in his shoulders, the subtle crease in his brow that hinted at something weighing on his mind. "Emma, isn't it?" William finally asked, his deep voice breaking the silence between them. "Yes, that's right," she replied with a polite smile, though her brow furrowed slightly in curiosity. William rarely spoke more than a few words during his visits. "I need your help," he said abruptly, his tone serious. The weight of his gaze made Emma pause, the cleaning cloth still in her hand. "My help?" she echoed, uncertain. "With what, exactly?" William hesitated for a moment, then leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. "I'd like you to join me for dinner tomorrow night. I'll explain everything then." Emma blinked, stunned. This wasn't just unexpected. It felt like the opening act of a story she couldn't yet comprehend. The next evening, Emma Clark stood in front of the mirror in her modest apartment, staring at her reflection with a mix of disbelief and nervousness. She had spent most of the day debating whether to go. The offer from William Royce, the enigmatic billionaire she barely knew, seemed almost surreal. Why would someone like him invite her, a coffee shop barista, to dinner? What could he possibly want? She had initially declined, but William's persistence had been as surprising as it was convincing. "I promise you won't regret it," he had said with a tone of finality, leaving her no room for further argument. Now, as the hour approached, her nerves were in overdrive. Wearing a simple black dress she had owned for years, Emma decided she would go, not out of curiosity, but to understand what this unusual request was truly about. When Emma arrived at the restaurant, it felt like stepping into another world. The rooftop venue, overlooking the sparkling San Francisco skyline, was a picture of luxury she had only ever seen in movies. The dim lighting, soft jazz music, and clinking glasses painted a scene far removed from her daily life. William was already there, seated at a table near the glass railing. He looked effortlessly commanding in a tailored navy suit, his eyes scanning the crowd until they landed on her. Rising to greet her, he gestured toward the seat opposite him. "You came," he said simply, a hint of approval in his tone. Emma sat down cautiously, her hands folding nervously in her lap. "I almost didn't. I'm still not sure why I'm here." William leaned back in his chair, studying her as though weighing how much to reveal. "Let's just say, I need someone different for tonight. Someone who isn't part of this world." His cryptic response only deepened Emma's curiosity, but before she could press further, a familiar voice broke through the ambiance. Well, William, who's this?" Emma turned to see a stunning blonde woman approaching the table, her designer dress and air of confidence unmistakable. Isabella Hart. Emma's presence had not gone unnoticed, and the confrontation that followed would change the course of the evening. The air at the rooftop restaurant seemed to grow heavier as Isabella Hart, William's ex-fiancée, approached their table. Her every step was deliberate, her designer heels clicking against the polished floor with an authority that turned heads. Draped in an emerald gown that shimmered under the soft lights, she exuded an aura of untouchable elegance. But her piercing gaze was fixed squarely on Emma, her expression a mix of curiosity and disdain. "William," Isabella purred, her voice smooth but laced with an edge. "I didn't realize you'd moved on so quickly. And, with someone so unique." Her eyes swept over Emma, taking in her simple black dress and modest demeanor. Emma's cheeks flushed, but she held her head high. Despite her unease, she refused to shrink under Isabella's gaze. William, however, remained calm, his lips curving into a faint, deliberate smile. "Isabella," he greeted smoothly, rising from his seat. "I didn't expect to see you here tonight." "Clearly," Isabella replied, her tone sharp. "I thought we'd agreed to keep things civilized." William's expression didn't falter. "This is Emma Clark," he said, gesturing toward her. "She's my date tonight." Emma blinked in surprise at his words, her mind racing. Date? That hadn't been part of their brief conversation earlier. She looked up at William, but his composed expression gave nothing away. Isabella's laugh was a melodic but cold sound. Your date? Really, William? Is this some kind of joke? William's gaze hardened, the smile fading from his lips. Not at all. Emma is here because I wanted her to be. And frankly, she's a refreshing change from the superficiality I've grown accustomed to. The words cut through the tension like a blade, and for a moment, Isabella looked genuinely taken aback. But she quickly recovered, her mask of confidence slipping back into place. Emma, meanwhile, struggled to process the situation. She didn't know whether to feel flattered or humiliated, but she couldn't remain silent any longer. Taking a deep breath, she spoke, her voice calm but firm. I'm not here to compete with anyone, Emma said, meeting Isabella's gaze directly. And I'm certainly not here to be part of some game. The honesty in her words seemed to hang in the air, silencing the growing whispers around them. Even William glanced at her, a flicker of surprise in his otherwise composed demeanor. Isabella's eyes narrowed, her polished smile tightening. Well, William, I hope you know what you're doing. I always do, he replied coolly, his eyes not leaving Isabella's. As Isabella turned and strode away, the tension around the table began to ease. But for Emma, the night had only just begun. She couldn't shake the feeling that she had been drawn into something far bigger than herself. The night grew quieter as Isabella disappeared into the crowd, leaving William and Emma alone at their table. Emma felt a storm of emotions churning inside her, confusion, unease, and a flicker of defiance. She needed answers, and she wasn't going to leave without getting them. Emma leaned forward slightly, her voice steady but tinged with irritation. I'm not sure what kind of game you're playing, William, but I didn't agree to this. What's going on? William regarded her with an almost amused expression, his sharp blue eyes scanning her face as if weighing how much truth to reveal. Finally, he leaned back in his chair, folding his arms. Emma, I brought you here because I needed someone to remind me of what's real. This world, with its facades and games, has taken a toll on me. You're different, genuine, and unafraid to speak the truth. Her brow furrowed. And what does that have to do with me sitting here, being paraded in front of your ex-fiancé? A flicker of something softer passed through William's gaze, though his tone remained composed. Isabella hurt me. She betrayed me, and she'll never admit she was wrong. I wanted to show her that I don't need her, that there are people like you who have more authenticity in one moment than she's shown in years. Emma stared at him, her frustration mounting. So, you're using me to prove a point? To make her jealous? William's jaw tightened, but he didn't deny it. Emma shook her head, her voice laced with disappointment. You're just as superficial as the world you're trying to escape from, William. If you wanted revenge, you could have chosen someone else. I won't be a pawn in your personal drama. She rose from her seat, her resolve clear. But as she turned to leave, William's voice stopped her. Wait. There was a note of vulnerability in his tone that made her pause. Emma, he said, softer now. You're right. I've been selfish. But you've shown me something tonight. Something I didn't expect. You have strength, honesty, and a kind of grace I've never seen before. You're not just part of my plan anymore. Emma hesitated, turning back to face him. His words caught her off guard, but she remained skeptical. And what exactly do you expect from me, William? He stood slowly, his towering figure imposing but not threatening. I need your help. Marry me, not for love, not forever, but for 7 days. In those 7 days, you can walk away whenever you want, but I need to show Isabella, and maybe even myself, that I can move forward. Emma's heart raced at the absurdity of the request. 7 days? And then what? Then you're free, William replied, his voice steady. You keep being you, and I'll deal with the fallout. No strings attached. Emma crossed her arms, her expression guarded. Why should I trust you? "Because," William said, a rare sincerity in his tone, "you're the first person in a long time who's made me want to trust anyone." The church was bathed in soft light as guests filled the pews, their whispers echoing beneath the soaring arches. White roses adorned every corner, their delicate fragrance mingling with the weight of anticipation in the air. At the altar, William Royce stood tall in a perfectly tailored black suit, his hands clasped tightly behind his back. His sharp gaze was fixed forward, though a subtle tension betrayed the inner conflict he couldn't shake. Emma Clark, clad in a simple yet elegant white gown, stood at the far end of the aisle. Her steps were measured, her breath steady, though her heart raced with every beat. Her dress wasn't extravagant. It didn't need to be. It highlighted her natural beauty, the kind of quiet charm that required no embellishment. As she approached the altar, she caught William's eye, and for a fleeting moment, the world seemed to fall away. The priest's solemn voice began the ceremony, the words blurring in William's mind as he fought to keep his composure. Then, just as the priest asked, "If anyone has reason to object to this union, speak now, or forever hold your peace," the grand doors of the church swung open with a resounding crash. All heads turned as Isabella Hart stormed into the sanctuary. She was breathtaking in a flowing designer gown, her heels clicking like thunder against the polished floor. Her flawless exterior belied the storm of emotions in her eyes. "William," she called out, her voice trembling but defiant. "Stop this wedding. This isn't right." Emma froze, her hands tightening around the bouquet. William turned slowly, his expression unreadable as Isabella marched toward him. "William," Isabella pleaded, her voice breaking, "I made a mistake. I was foolish, but I love you. Don't throw away what we had." The room was silent, save for the quiet gasps of the guests. Emma's steady gaze met William's, a silent invitation for him to make his choice. She stepped back slightly, her composure unwavering. "William," Emma said softly, her voice steady and calm, "this is your choice. Don't let anger cloud it, and don't let pride guide it. Choose what feels true to you." William looked between the two women, his mind a whirlwind. Isabella, with her fiery beauty and commanding presence, represented the life he thought he wanted. But Emma, with her quiet strength and unshakable authenticity, had shown him something deeper. Taking a deep breath, he turned to Isabella. "What we had was beautiful," he said, his voice firm but laced with sadness. "But it wasn't built on trust or truth. Emma, she's shown me what those things look like." Isabella's eyes filled with tears as William turned back to Emma. His decision was clear. "Father," William said, his voice resolute, "please continue with the ceremony." The priest nodded, and as the vows were exchanged, the tension in the room dissolved. When the time came, William leaned forward, his kiss filled not with vengeance, but with gratitude and the promise of a new beginning. The warm glow of the evening sun filtered through the windows of William Royce's grand mansion as he carried Emma across the threshold. Her soft laughter filled the air as her wedding gown trailed gracefully behind them, a stark contrast to the whirlwind of emotions that had brought them here. "You didn't have to carry me," Emma teased, her cheeks flushed. "This wasn't in the contract." William smirked, setting her gently on her feet. "True," he replied, his tone light but tinged with something deeper. "But there's something about tradition I'm starting to appreciate." Emma stepped back, her expression shifting to one of quiet seriousness. "William," she began, her voice steady, "I agreed to this marriage under certain conditions, but there's something you need to know before we go any further." William's brow furrowed, his curiosity piqued. "What is it?" he asked, stepping closer. Emma drew in a deep breath, her hands clasping together as she gathered her courage. "I'm not here to play a role in anyone's revenge," she said firmly, "and I'm not here to save you. This may have started as a contract, but if we're going to move forward, it has to be real, for both of us." William looked at her for a long moment, his sharp gaze softening. "I thought I brought you into this for one reason," he admitted. "But now I realize you've given me something I didn't know I needed, a chance to start again." Emma's lips curved into a small smile. "And what does starting again look like for you?" "Like this," William said simply, taking her hand. "No contracts, no schemes, just you and me, figuring it out together." That night, the mansion wasn't filled with grand celebrations or extravagant displays. Instead, it was quiet, intimate, a beginning built on something neither of them had expected to find: trust.